Hey, boys and girls, we are live again. One more week. And let me put this. Okay, there we go. We are live and we are going to answer your questions. So type your questions over there. And we already have one. If you're new to this show, it's easy to explain. We haven't prepared anything. We answer your questions. If you don't ask questions, we close it. We go home. Actually, we are already home. I'm home. I stay where I am, but close the session. Anyways, here is Akiva. First, $5. Thank you so much. That's amazing. Cheers.
Thank you.
Thanks for that. And from Akiva, listening to the show, I realized we have a distributed monolith, not microservices. What advice do you have to untangle it? Shall I start? You want to start? I can start. I'm gonna
go
be
ahead
short.
and start.
I don't like the idea of changing the architecture for the sake of changing it. Whatever works should I believe we should keep it as is. And I would focus on the new features in that application, right? Or updates or changes to the so you figure out, oh, we need to develop this feature, or we need to improve this feature, or whatever, this tiny part of that monolith. And then you start thinking, how can I move that out? Rather than how can I break my monolith into a bunch of small pieces, even though majority of it I might never change, right? So think about how to move things that you will be working on next inside that monolith or distributed monolith or whatever it is, right? And when I say move it out next, because I'm just now realizing that you said distributed monolith and not a monolith. So you probably already have multiple applications and what's not, right? That means that you need to start thinking also about APIs, right? How does one application talk to a different application without assuming anything but the version of the API that is currently in production, right? So you develop against production of that dependent service or application or whatever it is. And if somebody's cooking changes to that API, first of all, you ignore it until it's in production. Second, every change to that API that you depend on needs to be backwards compatible. If it's not backwards compatible, kind of the whole story about microservices falls apart immediately. There is no help. You cannot do it.
Yeah. So what I would say a few things. First of all, a major part of it is just understanding that you have a distributed monolith and not a microservice. So a huge part of solving anything is understanding that you have that challenge or that difficulty in the first place.
Is that like AA meetings? When you start the meeting, you said, I'm an alcoholic.
Hold on. But that is true about many things, right? We have to admit these things and understand them, and understanding that only from there can we actually grow. Now, do I believe that microservices are the answer to every type of application? No. Do I believe that when you are starting new systems, they should almost always be microservice-based architectures? The answer is typically yes, but still not 100% of the time. It really depends. And you always have to ask your questions of the complexities versus, is this something that is going to be upgraded always? Is this just a small application? You have to ask yourself a lot of questions to understand which type of architecture is going to be right for you. And the answer is not always going to be microservices, even if it is the majority of use cases. Now, what you have to understand is how much pain that you're going through today, that the different teams are going through today, how much is the distributed monolith actually holding you back from doing what you would want to do? There are cases where re-architecting is worthwhile because it will unlock different capabilities that are really important to you. There are other companies that, in their situation, they're perfectly fine with the distributed monolith and they don't need to go down something that's not actually going to give them the value. So you really have to do a cost-benefit analysis of this, what the pain is and what the gain would be.
here's what I'm going.
Yeah.
Let me interrupt you there. Most of the companies who don't have microservice architecture do not or cannot know what pain there is because you have no point of reference, right? Because if all you know is this, then that is actually good. It's better than anything else if there is nothing else, right?
But
You
kind
need
of.
experience something to understand the pain.
So yes and no, because you can also understand things sometimes just intuitively by, for example, oh, I wanted to introduce Flagger / Argo rollout / whatever, but couldn't
True.
because of A, B, C, D, E. I wanted to do GitOps in separate repos and really do all this, but no, but I'm stuck because of my architecture doing this. I wanted to be all declarative, but because of how I set up my database, I have to do it imperative upgrades. Because, right, so there are things that you want to do because you understand these tools and what value they would bring, but you can't use them. So there's the missing out on things that you can understand to a certain extent.
Depends. I think that you're still speaking from the perspective of a person who actually experienced those examples that you're saying, right? Kind of, it's very easy to come to conclusion. Actually, okay, so this is the only thing I know. Everybody's talking about GitOps, but GitOps is actually not a good idea. Kind of look how horrible it is. Kind of, I just tried it; it doesn't work. It's shit. Kind of, it's very easy to actually make a wrong conclusion.
Yes,
based off lack of experience. And
Which
companies
is
do
one
that
of-
all the time, right?
Right.
Kind of many companies were ignoring Kubernetes because because of their horrible experience. Oh, tried Kubernetes and it doesn't work. It's horrible. It's this and that, right? And now they're adopting it and realizing that they need to change a bunch of things only because of the pressure. Kind of like, okay, so
Exactly.
I thought to adopt it
Right.
being second last, but now I'm literally last type of situation.
Yes. Now, so again, I think that that is one of the places where I do agree with you. I think there are certain things that people can understand intuitively. There are things also that you can reach very bad decisions. That is where consultancy firms, experts that you bring in, you do not need the expertise in it necessarily yourself in experiencing everything because no one can experience everything. And you do with a day job. That is where systems integrators, where consultancy firms, where outside consultants, where friends that work in the industry and networking and talking with people in the similar industries as you that work at different companies and learning from one another. That is where that stuff comes into place, right? One of the things that I love, and I know you worked in the consultancy business as well for a long time, Victor, right? And one of the things that I loved with that was being able to bring that, because I can specialize in X, I can go and give certain expertise or things to companies that they may not have. I know that I have brought in consultants to help me on things that I had no clue on. And I think that that's an important thing also, to know to call for help from external sources even to help us figure that out. Because we can't be experts at everything.
That's where I was going indirectly with my previous comments, that very often you don't see really, because you're blinded by what you have. And that I saw it. The reason why I'm saying that is precisely because I work as a consultant and kind of like, why don't you do this? Oh, then you spend a full day and then something starts clicking, kind of, okay, so, it's very hard to connect those dots because individually, many of those things, like we mentioned GitOps, right? Individually, GitOps is not a great thing. But by connecting it with other things, certain things are enabled and then it all starts getting into place, right? Anyways, yes. Yeah. Find somebody who experienced that kind of microservices, build the microservice-based system, and then bring that person for a couple of days. Talk to him or her. We have another, I don't know what this is, from Bertes, gifted 5 memberships for the channel. That's amazing. Thank you so much. I have no idea how it works, but it must be amazing. Thank you, honestly, so much. Now, that was my alarm clock ringing. because I had to set alarm because I always forget that we have a sponsor. Sponsor is, let me remove this. Sponsor is Codefresh training, GitOps. If you want to learn GitOps as a beginner, as a mid-level, as an expert, no matter where you are, if you're interested in GitOps and that GitOps happens to be Argo CD and not Flux, you want to check codefresh.io, you put the Victor as a code over there, and you get 50% off, I'm told. It's probably a great course. I haven't tried it myself, but it's probably a great course because I know the author. Author is really creating great material. Check it out. Put Victor as a code over there. You help them, you help me. Everybody's happy. Thank you, Codefresh, for sponsoring. And now let me see, where were we? We have 5 projects in the company. Every project has its own DevOps engineer. We're thinking to merge them all into one infrastructure team. How would you recommend to start the transformation? I would need to know first what does that DevOps engineer do in that team. So let me put it this way. I am a strong believer in platforms when they are done right. And very often operational things that require a dedicated person for operation in a team, I'm not now talking about the system as a whole, is not needed. Because if you do things right, you can enable developers to get what they want without having to spend 3 years learning about that something, right? It can be done. It's been done. You should work towards enabling that team to do what that person is doing without that person, right? And your time is always better than creating a system that will do something for you or for somebody else than doing it yourself over and over again. So if the question is, move that person into infrastructure team or whatever you want to call it, and if that infrastructure team is going to do 2 things, one is to ensure that the system works as a whole, kind of like you need that team, call it SREs, kind of like system is still up and running. And this is system as a whole. It's very different from things related to a project, right? Project is only a subset. You cannot give to a project, members of a specific project, the task saying, is the system up and running? Because I have no idea. Kind of why I don't care, right?
Right.
So is the system up and running? Number one. Second, how can that team do what they need to do without opening Jira tickets? 2 tasks.
Yeah.
Okay. You're not talkative. I'm not used to you like that.
I am.
From Ashish, can you please create a playlist for MLOps? I haven't done videos on MLOps myself. So it wouldn't be a playlist from this channel. I don't have playlists from other channels. To be honest, I never keep any bookmarks and stuff like that. I just watch something or read something and forget where I found it. I'm not a good person. Scott might be a better one for that. By the way, I found out your blog the other day, Scott. I had no idea you have a blog or something like that.
Really?
Very cool stuff there. Yeah, I had no idea. You never said it.
Yeah, vrabbi.cloud. Exactly. I do have
Easy to remember.
Exactly.
What analytical database would you recommend for a project with 100 million records per week, excluding Postgres? The project is running on AWS. I would need to know why it's excluding Postgres.
I would need to understand that as well, because Postgres, most of the analytical databases that are powerful are either Postgres or based off of Postgres. So many of them are actually, they may not call it Postgres, but a lot of them are based off of Postgres. I'd have to understand what the challenge is with Postgres, because Postgres, if tuned correctly and if deployed correctly, is amazing as an analytical database. Well, what I will say is I don't know in AWS specifically. I can tell you that for this type of scale and things like that, what I have found the best in Azure is ADX. but I don't know in AWS. ADX is Microsoft proprietary. So, yeah.
Just whatever you do, don't consider Oracle for anything.
Why? You don't want Oracle to make another $25 million?
No, I don't mind companies making millions or billions of dollars. That's fine by me. I just mind being visited by their lawyers if I change my mind ever.
Exactly.
I think that they have more lawyers than any other experts in that company. Okay. Next one from Noam. As we are maintaining on-prem infrastructure using VMware and also cloud flavors, AKS, EKS, GK, etc. What is the best tool for deploying and managing multiple Kubernetes clusters across those environments? I think that this cluster API and Crossplane.
So
the
answer is, should he be using cluster API? Yes. Should he be using Crossplane? Yes. Do I believe that there is also a need for something called a fleet manager? The answer is yes. Do you write that fleet manager on your own, going the open source route with things like Sveltos for add-on management and all of that? That's one option. The other option is to go what I typically recommend, especially when running, because you have the on-prem side here as well. One of the biggest challenges is, A, how do I standardize across all of my clouds as much as possible? But also, how do I get support? And vendor support for the fleet manager, vendor support for all of these things as much as possible is important when it becomes key infrastructure. Just like you're not using open source KVM as your hypervisor and you're using vSphere because you want the enterprise grade supported version. I think the same thing goes for Kubernetes. That's where tools like SpectroCloud, which is my personal favorite that I believe is the best, or things like NKP, which is the Nutanix Kubernetes platform, which is really just the rebranding of D2IQ, which is also a great fleet management solution. Or you could go with things like Rancher does kind of fleet management to some extent. Just in the VMware ecosystem, you have Tanzu Mission Control. But I think you need a fleet manager. That fleet manager can be managed through Crossplane, right? So it's important to bring Crossplane, allows me that declarative nature, but you do need that orchestrator as well. You could build it yourself, but I recommend going the supported route.
I mean, Crossplane can give you, through compositions, can give you that uniformity from the user level, right? Kind of, okay, so all those different clusters are going to, first of all, there is no way that you're going to have exactly the same cluster on EKS and GKE and whatsoever, right? It's going to be all different, but you can have a uniform interface for all the, from the user perspective, it can be kind of, oh, give me a cluster, right? Those are the 5 arguments or 50 or whatever. And behind the scenes, very different things are happening. Crossplane gives you that, and then you do need something also on top that will kind of give you that fleet management flavor.
Yeah.
Oh, you're gonna love this one, the next one, unless you had something to say for this one still.
No.
Okay. What's your opinion on using Kubespray with vanilla Kubernetes for on-prem production in a team that knows Ansible well? Any gotchas or things running we should consider? And I'm going to excuse myself from this. And if you hear profanities, that's from Scott. I'm going to excuse myself saying that I don't know Kubespray because I'm not using Ansible, so I have no idea how it works.
Okay,
now,
so I... yeah.
Just dropping it to Scott. There you go.
Yeah. I really do not like Kubespray at any extent whatsoever. I am very much against Kubespray.
Are you against Kubespray or Ansible?
No, I think that Ansible is fine for specific use cases. I think Ansible is a great tool to be used in conjunction with Packer in order to build your images. I think it is a great solution in traditional IT monolith environments that need to be able to maintain and can't move to immutable infrastructure and things like that, great, go ahead and use it. Kubernetes does not have those characteristics. Kubernetes does not need those characteristics. Kubernetes is impeded and hurt by having those characteristics, and as such, the only way to manage Kubernetes is immutable infrastructure. The only way to manage Kubernetes is using what the industry is using, which are tools like Cluster API that handle that for us. There are very, very specific edge cases where immutable infrastructure in Kubernetes becomes a very big challenge. It is solvable there as well. But things like bare metal Kubernetes environments where I have local storage and not shared storage because I have extreme high latency requirements from my storage, or I have a NVMe up the back directly into the pod because I need special performance of yada, yada, yada. Okay, in those cases, there's a question, should that be in Kubernetes or not? Okay, but fine.
If it is, that still does not mean that you should now throw everything that should be done as it should be done because of that thing. Okay, maybe that part, whatever, you should manage in whatever non-Kubernetes way you should manage, but not everything.
Exactly. I believe that the only legitimate way today to provision Kubernetes clusters is using a tool like Cluster API. That doesn't mean Cluster API is your interface. Cluster API is the implementation detail that gives us that capability when we're dealing with self-managed. If you're using EKS, GKE, AKS, I still believe Cluster API is the right tool to provision those. But I can make the claim that it would be fine to do it using just crossplane directly with the AWS, Google, or Azure providers, even though I still think that Cluster API gives me huge benefits there, and I would prefer to use Cluster API within crossplane, add that other level in there because of the values that it brings me. But I'm fine with saying that you don't need it there. When you're dealing with on-prem and when you're dealing with vanilla Kubernetes, 100% Cluster API is the tool that has the adoption. It's the tool that has more contributors. It's the tool that is faster and better maintained. It is the tool that has basically the blessing of the entire Kubernetes ecosystem when we look at any of the vendors that are building it, right? Let's put it at this. Who is the company behind Ansible? Red Hat / IBM, right? Who is the company that has been working for the past few years of moving off of their forked initial implementation of Cluster API to the new version of Cluster API? They moved off of Ansible installation for OpenShift. There is a reason that the vendor behind Ansible decided that Ansible was not the right way to install Kubernetes. And they moved to using Cluster API. Okay, it's a machine API. They're moving to Cluster API. Leave those elements aside.
Those are details
mechanism, those are details, right? The idea of Cluster API is what OpenShift is built off of today. And that is how they have decided as the vendor behind Ansible. I don't think there's a bigger acknowledgement that Ansible is not the right way to do it than the fact that the vendor behind it stopped doing it that way.
You know, the way I see it, there are two important things or questions there, right? First, what is the right tool to manage something through APIs, right? And that is not Ansible. Ansible was never designed for that. It's designed, I go there, I execute this, then I parse that, and so on and so forth, right? Terraform, and I'm now using only that requirement. Terraform is a tool well designed for that, for example. And it's just as an example, kind of like, how do I talk to an API to give it the desired state, and API will do it for me, right? And the second part of that story is, do we want to embrace the mechanism inside Kubernetes, which would be drift detections, reconciliation loops, and so on and so forth? And that's where we need to move away from Terraform-like and then go into something that is like Cluster API, crossplane, ACK, ASO, whatever it is, right? When you combine those two, because those are the two critical parts of Kubernetes, how do we manage stuff by talking to an API, and whether we want that reconciliation loop and drift detection, the whole controllers idea behind controllers to do the work for us, right? And Ansible just is not a good option for either of the two. It's just terrible.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, the thoughts on KYAML support being added in Kubernetes 134, excluding Q or KCL. I feel like it might as well use JSON or better in editor format. I don't know. What is KYAML? Do you know, Scott? Without Googling?
No
You're
clue.
Googling it. No, I bet. No. I don't know. Now I need to figure it out. I don't know what it is. So
KYAML, it's a Go package from under Kustomize.
Yeah,
It's something
I'm
with
seeing that as
Kustomize.
well. I'm just KYAML looks like JSON, but named after YAML. So
okay.
I don't know.
Yeah, are you looking at the same Reddit post that I am?
We're looking at the same Reddit post, exactly. So I don't know.
I'm trying to. Okay, first of all, I will say this. I like it more than JSON, actually, with it not requiring me to quote the key.
Keys. Oh, that's so amazing. I'm honestly kind of like, I cannot stand JSON just for that. Kind of like, I cannot continue writing.
I actually don't mind this syntax, to tell you the truth, at all.
This is very KCL-like syntax, actually. This is KCL, almost identical.
It's basically KCL, right?
Yeah.
Yes, I think that it's definitely like KCL. I actually like it. I don't know. I'd have to play with it. I'd have to write it. My issue with all of these things with like KYAML, right? If it's a Kubernetes format, okay, my issue is that like in JSON and YAML, as much as I have my issues with YAML and I have my issues with JSON, in the end, both of them have such good IDE plugins. They have IntelliSense. They have all the tools to convert between A to B. They have all of the tooling exists for them. YAML validators. Every IDE works with them. Every IDE can give me syntax highlighting. All of these things. When you introduce a new language, there are a lot of things that at the beginning a user will have to give up on, because they don't get those niceties from day zero. Only when it actually gains enough traction do all of those plugins, all of those tools, all of that ecosystem get built up. I'm not sure there's enough value in KYAML to make it worthwhile. Do I like the format?
Looking at the example.
Would I use it? I don't know.
You know, initially I was excited because, hey, it looks like KCL and stuff like that. But then I'm looking at the example. Maybe it's the wrong example. It does look like JSON rather than KCL in terms that there are no, it's not like KCL or YTT that allows you to do some kind of logic,
right,
that will convert itself afterwards to YAML, because I'm kind of, I don't mind YAML, to be honest. Especially since I'm not writing it. YAML feels like a decent format to be output by something, right?
I'm not a fan of YAML in a lot of cases because YAML does cause issues. I like, it has to be known. YAML does have many challenges to it. With that being said,
but not as many as JSON. I cannot put a bloody comment in JSON. That alone is a breaker for me.
Yes, that is a serious pain of JSON. I completely agree. However, I personally do like the more explicit nature of JSON rather than the the spacing of YAML.
Yeah, that's horrible. That's horrible.
So I go back and forth. It's not an easy one to give a direct 100% answer on. What I will say is I understand why this is created, but I just wish that they would have taken something like KCL and just thrown that in there, right? Or taken something of that sort. I don't like that this is being done that way.
Yeah. Anyways, next one. What tools, strategies, techniques would you use for deploying a Kubernetes-based system into an air-gapped environment, syncing repos, dependencies, charts, images, etc.? This is your domain, Scott, right? Are we going to go back to the air-gap, basically? How to do air-gap? Syncing repos, dependencies, charts, images, just kind of mirror everything, right?
Yeah. So you do need to. Now, how you do all of that, it's not necessarily an easy task. Harbor is by far the best tool, in my mind, for hosting things when they're local. There is so that's number one that I think is huge. When it comes to actually Helm charts and things like that, there is a great tool. It's actually from VMware that's open source called Distribution Tooling for Helm. That what it is able to do, it's based off of some HEPs, which are Helm enhancement proposals. And it allows basically, it follows like certain annotations that have like what images exist in there. And it's able to basically bundle into, let's say, a tar for you, the Helm chart plus all of the images within it. And then when you get to the destination environment, you bring that into the air-gapped environment and do a push of it. It will rewrite the values YAML, though. It will rewrite the chart that it is using the correct image references, right? Which is a really, really nice thing. They had a previous tool that was called the asset relocation tool for Kubernetes, relocates, that was killed. And basically, instead of that, you have the distribution tooling for Helm. DT, which I have used quite often. I strongly recommend it if you're working in air-gapped environments, because it will make your life so much easier.
I'm going to love the next one. Helm versus Kustomize. Me first. Helm versus anything, whatever you put on the right side of after versus, that's my vote. Literally. Maybe also, okay. Here's
unless you're a third party releasing your software to someone else.
Third party, you need to, it's a standard, you need to release as Helm. You need to consume it as Helm for your own applications. There is only one actually when I think about that might be worse. And that's JSONnet. I cannot stand it.
JSONnet is way worse.
Yeah, I cannot stand it. So if you put Helm versus JSONnet, Helm might win in my head. Otherwise, anything else.
So I am not a fan of Helm at any level. I think that Helm is one of the worst formats that exist on planet Earth. I am very excited to see what happens in Helm 4 because there are rumors going around that Helm 4 is going to add support for multiple different languages and not just Go templating. And it's going to add in a bunch of things into it. It's going to add Q. It's going to add, like, there are these rumors going around. I don't know what will end up happening, but if they solve the two main issues that I have, one, Go templating and not structured, two, and this is huge as well, the horrifying management of CRDs in Helm charts.
Oh, yeah.
If those two things are able to be solved, I will be the first one recommending Helm again because Helm is already everywhere. Helm is already a standard. Helm already has the distribution capabilities. If they are able to solve, if they took YTT and brought it in, if they took Q, brought it in, if I were them, what I would say is they have to have a pluggable model of supporting multiple languages because there's no reason that Helm, in the end, takes a values YAML, runs it through something, and has a few hook systems. There is no reason that Helm can't support a pluggable language configurator for the templating.
But there are two parts of it, really big ones. The one is how to translate Go templating into YAML and apply it to the cluster, right? The other part is how do we distribute this something, right? And what I'm understanding with that proposal, which I haven't seen, just based on what you said, basically, hey, the translation, why do you care? Kind of like Helm becomes a distribution engine of whatever you want, in a way, right?
Exactly.
Right?
If
Kind
that
of, you
is
want
what ends up
KCL,
happening,
cool. You want to distribute your KCL as a Helm chart. Here's how
Right.
you do it. I would be the first one to use it. If you give me, I don't know, KCL, whatever, Q, doesn't matter. First one.
Right.
I
What
have
I
no
will say-
strong problems with Helm as being distribution engine.
Right.
None.
What I will say, when I looked at the schedule for KubeCon, North America and Atlanta this November, when I went over the schedule, there is one session that I put in my schedule because I don't go to sessions. There is one session I put on my schedule beyond the one that I'm giving and the one that Victor's giving just because, I decided, okay, I'll listen to Victor. But there is one session, and that is the session on what's coming in Helm 4, basically. Because I said, okay, for that, I'm willing to join because the difference from Helm 2 with Tiller to Helm 3 was huge, but it was still terrible. I'm waiting for Helm 4 and seeing if that can be the holy grail because I don't like being on the outside and not going with the industry standards. I have to, though, with technical integrity, be against Go templating as the mechanism for generating YAML manifests in Kubernetes.
But when you think about it, when we both say, and you probably think in the same direction that Helm has to be used for third party, that's because it's a distribution mechanism. I couldn't care less. I mean, when I talk about third party, it's not because it's in Go templating. I couldn't care less about that part.
Exactly. It's because it is everywhere. It is because of its distribution capabilities, because of the registry, because of Artifact Hub, and because it is easily shareable, because it has OCI support, because a million things. That's why you need to be on it. And because everything integrates with Helm today. Everything, Argo CD, Cap Controller, Flux CD, Rancher Fleet, all of these things work with Helm. So we need Helm.
Okay, nice to see you, Chris. What advice would you give to someone that would like to transition from dev to SRE? First, it depends if it's a team of SREs or no, and if the rest of SRE team are primarily ops people, or initially ops or devs, right? If they're initially ops, there can be a lot of conflict, right? Because ops is used to work in certain way, devs are used to work in very different way. That is very, very conflicting. Unless it all settles and everybody becomes truly SRE, kind of, we are building solutions for the system rather than putting down fires. Other than that, start from the bottom. Kind of, if you have development skills, you're halfway there. Just start from the bottom. Linux, always Linux. It's always Linux. If you have a Mac computer, just WSL or whatever, WSL, whatever the name.
WSL, yeah.
There we go. Linux.
Again.
Linux is basically everything else is optional. Kind of like whether you will learn, let's say, Azure or AWS depends greatly on where you are working, right? Almost everything depends on where you're working, except Linux. That's the only. And if your company is running Windows servers, then go somewhere else.
Yeah.
That's the only thing I can say.
Well, what I would say is, in my mind, the best SREs are the people that were devs, became operations, and then became SRE, or were operations, went into dev, and then come back to SRE, because you have to understand both sides. If you only understand one side, you're lopsided in your outlook when you do SRE. SRE has to be in the middle and has to understand both sides and has to be someone who is able to actually understand the trade-offs between A and B. and has to really have that deep understanding. So if you are planning on moving towards the SRE type job, you need to really work on operational skills on infra side, understand that, and then move to the SRE position, because otherwise you're always going to be leaning in one direction when sometimes that is the answer and sometimes it isn't. It's just because of lopsided knowledge gaps.
But just to be clear, in Google, where it was born as a role, it all started with a sentence. How would we solve this problem if we would look at it from the development perspective? Basically, kind of like, what would happen if we give developers to be in charge of our infrastructure? And I'm not saying that everybody is SRE in Google, just to be clear. You need everything. Next one, actually, two of the same question from Ben Youssef and
Batren
Noamaz.
Yosef and Noamaz.
I cannot pronounce that, but those two. Sorry for that. What do you think about EKS? I think it's
EKSA. No. Look at the full question. It's EKSA. That is EKS Anywhere. That's EKS Anywhere. That's EKS Anywhere is the Amazon solution for deploying Kubernetes on vSphere, Bare Metal, Nutanix, and so on.
I have superficial experience with it, and it wasn't good.
I have experience with it. I am not a fan of it. I think that it is very clear that it was built by a cloud company that does not understand deeply what an on-prem environment actually looks like and what the needs are and the complexity of an on-prem environment. What I mean by that is very simple. When we look at, like, the biggest difference is, think of Amazon or Microsoft or Google, any of them, like Apple. Okay, when Apple developed their operating system and they now make their own silicon and they make their own computer, it is extremely easy for them to build a good experience because they don't need to support 55,000 different motherboards and 55,000 different CPUs and all of these things. They need to support one thing because that's what they do. When you talk about why I think that Microsoft and Windows is such a marvel from a technological perspective is because look at how relatively stable it is.
Oh, yeah.
When you think about how many different types of permutations.
But you're not talking about PC, not servers.
Yes. Yeah. I'm talking PC. Again, also server is extremely stable. Would I use it in a server? You should be using Linux for servers, but also server, extremely stable. The question of should you use it or not, that's a whole other question, right? From the stability of the solution. It's a marvel what they're able to do there. Same thing, the Linux kernel, okay? That's very different from Apple. Amazon live in a world of we do everything. We control our data center. We have standards how everything works. When we build a solution, it is built to run on our infrastructure. It is built to work in our network. It is built to work with our understanding of security, with our understanding of how storage works, with our all of this. When they go to do something in the on-prem world, that's where things get challenging because they don't have the deep knowledge that many other companies do that work more so in the on-prem world of the challenges of the different types of storage and the different types of network attached storage versus NAS versus SAN versus am I doing fiber channel? Am I using iSCSI? What am I using for my connectivity? I remember initially talking to a vendor. It was not EKS Anywhere, but a similar solution. And fighting with them for over an hour about the fact that network access to them via proxy, the fact they support proxy networks, does not mean that they support air-gapped. I told them air-gapped means there is a gap in the air. Okay, a proxy is just a bypass. No, there is no gap there. An air-gapped environment means there is a gap. Okay, and this was another cloud provider that I was talking to. It is a major issue. And I don't think they are amazing as a cloud. But a cloud is a cloud, and on-prem is on-prem. There are experts in on-prem. There are experts in cloud. They aren't the same. VMware tried to create a cloud, a public cloud. It failed miserably.
Exactly.
But there is
I was about to bring that example, or Red Hat
Okay.
as well.
Okay, but there is no one as good at as good as VMware at building a software-defined data center for your on-premise environment, the hypervisor, software-defined networking, all of that, the creme de la creme of the industry. Okay, no one is like them in that. But when they tried to build vCloud Air, complete utter failure. Okay, that is important to note. I believe the same thing goes with Amazon. Very much so. The only vendor that is somewhere in the middle there that can kind of live on both sides is Microsoft.
Exactly.
And that is because Microsoft has such a strong enterprise hold and have been in the on-prem world for so long. They were always there. Exactly. When they built Azure, it took them a long time to make it into a really good cloud, but now it is an amazing cloud. And you have Azure, but it runs kind of as separate business units, and then they have the connections between them. And they are the only vendor that I've seen that is actually good at both.
It's a long time ago. This has been really long time ago. I don't know whether they still do that. I was present once that actually they shipped something similar to a shipping container kind of, and saying, you want your own data center? This is the data center. Kind of like with machines and everything. You just plug it in. And then that's something like what you're saying, EKS Anywhere might make more sense. Kind of like, this is on our hardware, this is on our networking, this is how we know it works. You just need to put it in your building in a way.
Yeah, exactly. They had AWS Outposts is what it was called, and is called.
Okay, there we go.
AWS Outposts makes sense because all you're doing is saying, create an availability zone in my data center. Great, but it's their servers, their switches, their routers, their everything, and they're just connecting. They have full control. It works perfect. No issues.
Okay, next one from Christopher. For Kubernetes Homelab, I have cheap $200 server. How would you guys install Kubernetes knowing that Ansible is not an option? I never use my own servers. I never even tried it, to be honest. So no idea. Are you ever setting up yourself stuff, Homelab stuff?
Yes, I do. If it's So it really depends what you're doing. If you just want to run single node, just do K3S and be done with it. If you're running a hypervisor on that server, be it Proxmox, be it vSphere, be it whatever it is, and you want to do like multi-VM and all of that, again, if you're just looking for like a quick, easy open source, but like cool, and you want to try a new cool technology, try out Talos. Makes it extremely easy to spin up Kubernetes clusters in a really cool, secure way. I don't recommend it typically in production, Talos. And the reason
this is a cheap server. This is Homelab,
exactly.
I'm assuming.
Exactly, because there's just too many challenges with security tools and things like that, and that don't work because of but you don't need that in the Homelab. Talos is going to be extremely easy to set up. I would use Talos. Or K3S. If you're doing single node K3S, multi-node, use Talos.
Other than what to use for storage on-prem, other than Longhorn, anything other than Longhorn, but
yes,
Proxmox, Portvox, sorry.
Use old spindle disks before you use Longhorn.
Tapes.
Yeah,
have you seen those? Like,
yep, exactly. But you forget that I started out initially working with mainframes. So yes, I know tapes, and I know.
There we go.
Yeah,
there we go.
But the answer is the best solution is Portworx. Portworx also does cost money. There is a free tier, so if you are a very small environment, there is that. If you are able to pay for the creme de la creme, the answer is Portworx. There are other open source solutions that exist out there that are not as bad as Longhorn.
Is it like I have impression that your opinion of Longhorn is similar to your opinion of Helm? Anything else?
Very close to that, yes. Now, what I would say also is the real question of, do you need distributed storage on-prem instead of using a storage arrays CSI driver? Or if you're running on vSphere, use the vSphere CSI. If you're running anywhere on bare metal, things like that, and you've attached storage, you have Pure, use the Pure CSI. You have Dell, use the Dell CSI. If you're using NetApp, use Trident, right? So like you can use those as well. There are huge values to software-defined storage. That's where Portworx comes into play. Yeah, Longhorn, just stay away from it, please. Like, don't do it to yourself. The only thing you should ever take from Rancher is K3S if you're running at the edge or in a Homelab, and their UI, which is very nice as a dashboard for Kubernetes.
Yeah,
those are the two things. And I prefer Headlamp over their UI now as well. But you can choose their UI or Headlamp, take K3S for edge, and beyond that, stop.
Okay, sticking with the storage. Should you run object storage like MinIO? Set a Kubernetes cluster. Again, I'm mostly in cloud. I have no idea. In cloud, I prefer running whatever the provider gives me.
So there can be huge benefits of running actually even MinIO in the cloud that we've seen by certain customers in different use cases in the cluster. There can be huge performance benefits, especially for like ETLs and things like that. If you're running a bunch of ETLs in Kubernetes, actually having it locally, having the MinIO within your cluster and not going out to the AWS API for S3 and all of that. And it can be much, 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 much cheaper as well, running ETLs with MinIO and things like that. So it is a good use case. What I will say, like anything, if you are running it in Kubernetes and you brought data in, you must deal with backups correctly. Right? So the question of how I deal with backing up my object storage now becomes another question. Please do not do what I have a few geniuses of people that I have seen in the industry throughout the years, that all of the backup solutions basically for Kubernetes, almost all of them are based off of Valero.
Exactly.
Valero uses object storage as its backend. And I have had brilliant people that have decided to back up Kubernetes into MinIO buckets, completely legitimate, but the MinIO was running on the server that they were backing up. On the cluster, excuse me, they were backing up.
Well,
yeah. This is about the face I made when they told me that.
Okay, so did they know about it, or was it we had no even idea that it's on the same server?
We need object storage. They look online. How do I install object storage? Well, install the MinIO Helm chart from Bitnami. Okay, so they install it. They just didn't even think about it, right? Like, it's like, well, what am I going to do? Install MinIO on a server, but then it's not highly available. I'd rather deploy it in Kubernetes. Okay, and then you reach those situations. Okay, so yeah. I'll just leave that there.
How would you approach the problem of running a PostgreSQL database on AWS with a custom extension that most likely won't be available in RDS? I'd prefer to avoid managing stateful services. I mean, I would start by asking yourself, do you need a custom extension? I'm assuming, do you interpret it as we developed extension? Do you think that that's what it means?
I'm not sure. It may also just be an extension from a third party or things like that just isn't available in RDS because it's for a specialized type of whatever it is. In those cases, cloud native Postgres, CNPG is the best way. If you're not going to use the managed from the cloud, use CNPG. CNPG is from the company EDB. EDB are I believe, number 1 or number 2 contributor to Postgres in the world. They are geniuses. They also have a commercial offering around CNPG. So if your worry is, I don't want to have the DBAs that need to be able to deal with this and be able to support, and I want to have that 1-800 number to call that and have an SLA, great. So use CNPG on EKS and pay EDB for the CNPG Enterprise version. If you're fine with managing databases and all that, use CNPG. If your answer to me is going to be, we don't use Kubernetes, let's say that that was the case because I don't know. If you don't use Kubernetes, so spin up an EKS automatic cluster that you don't need to maintain almost anything, install CNPG, and still use that to deploy your Postgres because it is the best way to manage it.
Without a doubt, yeah. But also, I think it's always worth just double checking whether you need that something, because RDS. RDS is made to work for almost everybody. So you might want to also ask yourself, do I really need to be this special, whatever that special is? I mean, maybe you do, but often you don't. What do you think about AWS controllers for Kubernetes? I think that they're utterly horrible. They're just really, really bad. Like the ones for Azure, I like, right?
Yeah, they're very good. ASO is very good.
Yeah, so that nobody says that, because you work with crossplane, so you think everything is trash. No, ASO is good. It's consistent. It makes sense. All the stuff. The ACK is just really, really bad. First of all, coverage is miserable, right? Now you might not need more than what they're currently offering. It's completely inconsistent. It doesn't follow most of the practices for creating controllers. Just really don't.
Yeah. It is, I believe, beyond. It's probably the worst operator that exists in Kubernetes, I would think. I can't think of one that's worse.
There are always worse ones, but yeah. It's bad. It's really bad.
I said I can't think of one, though. It's really bad. The leaking credentials all over the place in statuses. Completely horrifying documentation. Horrible statuses. Lack of usage of events. Lack of usage of anything standard in the Kubernetes ecosystem. Weird error handling. Extremely difficult to import resources under its management. Just terrible. ASO, great.
And just to be, I might be wrong, but it feels mostly abundant also. It feels like something that
they made a huge deal about making it
couple of years ago.
We've released this, and then no, not anymore.
Okay, Ramiro, he was with us in one of the episodes. Helm is amazing as is. It's only going to get better.
I'm sorry, you're wrong.
I'm not sure. I think that he's teasing you, or me, or both of us, or maybe
on the talk itself. Ramiro said that he likes Helm. So
we did. Okay, then come to next Thursday, and then we can dedicate the whole episode fighting you on Helm. Bring somebody, bring a friend, so it's 2 against 2. How about that?
Exactly.
How can open source tools be designed so they remain manageable and scalable in large enterprise environments, avoiding the common pitfalls that drive companies towards proprietary solutions? First of all, I don't think that there are many, or there will be many, truly open source projects that are designed for large enterprise environments, right? I think that almost all open source projects that are successful because they have dedicated maintainers, and those dedicated maintainers need to earn salaries, and there must be a company on top of it that earns some money, and that company is most likely going to try to earn money by selling additional layers or something like that on top of that open source for large enterprises. So when we get to large enterprises, you're most likely going to find that actually something is missing in open source, whichever open source project you're using, and that's completely fair to me, right? Kind of, if you're a large enterprise, and I'm not saying pay for everything, no, but kind of for critical things, if you're a large enterprise and you're earning a lot of money, think of buying those licenses as actually supporting open source, right?
Yeah.
And most open source projects are really not designed to run at large scale and all the other things that you need, right? That's usually not their focus.
Exactly.
From Noam, you've said before that in order to understand Kubernetes, you need to start with understanding C groups, run C, containerd. What are your go-to deep dive resources to learn those topics? I didn't, just to be clear, I'm not saying that you need to understand all those things in depth, right?
Correct.
Kind of, I'm not saying, hey, let's go C groups, let's go. I'm just saying that you need to understand it enough, at least, at least from the operational perspective. You cannot just jump into Kubernetes, right? I wouldn't go as far as to say that you have to understand like run C. You don't.
No,
I mean,
sorry,
to be experienced with it. Sorry.
Correct.
Understand.
You need to understand
you don't have to be experienced.
That Docker does not run your container. A pod does not run, right? You need to understand that a pod is an abstraction that sends something to a CRI, to the container runtime interface, which is typically implemented, unless you are Red Hat, by containerd, and containerd calls out to run C to actually run the container itself inside of a Linux namespace, and they are all grouped within C groups, and today we use C groups v2 instead of C groups v1, and like, okay, understanding what each tool does and why I need that level of abstraction. There are just blog posts online, right? Understanding container runtime. There are always really good talks also at KubeCon that are all on YouTube on understanding CRI, right? Or what's new in CRI, and they go through what it is, right? There are great talks on that. I think like the best way to learn networking in Kubernetes is there was a great talk a few years ago at KubeCon that I saw on YouTube afterwards of building a CNI in Bash. Okay. Now,
there you go.
No one will ever use that CNI in their life. Okay. But when you look at the understanding of, okay, what it actually, because Bash, everyone in the tech world like basically knows, right? So it was best to do it in Bash, because if you did it in Go or whatever, someone would get caught up on I don't know Go or I don't know X or I don't know Y. So doing it in Bash democratized it. And then it's all about, okay, what does a CNI actually do? What does it receive from Kubernetes? What does Kubernetes do? What does it do? What does IP tables or NFT or NF tables or OVS or whatever, what do they do, right? And so it makes it clear. From that point, you understand what a CNI does. Now, do you need to understand how eBPF works? No. But you can understand now.
No, how it works, yeah. You don't have to be experienced with it, but kind of like, what it's for. Kind of
what it is, you need to understand.
Diagramming, the fact that
exactly, right? So those are the key things. I think like one of the things that made containers make a lot more sense for me was when I actually built a container using cat and tar. You can see there's a few sessions that I did. They're recorded on YouTube called Container Images as Witchcraft at different conferences on actually showing building a container image using cat and tar and base64, right? Basically showing like, here, what is a container image? It's all files, but actually understanding that puts so much, now I understand containers so much better, and I'm able to deal with them so much better when you understand actually what it is and how these things work and how the distributions work and what layers are and what it actually means to have overlay FS and these things. It all becomes clear. So as much as you can, do it. Try it, right? If it interests you, go even deeper. Do Kubernetes the hard way. You will learn Linux that way if you do Kubernetes the hard way. You will learn a lot of things about Linux that way if you do Kubernetes the hard way. And you know what? It's fun. If you have a weekend that you want to spend doing Kubernetes the hard way, go ahead. Never run a production workload on it, but do it. It's fun. You learn so much by doing that. Yeah, compile a kernel once. Don't understand what you're doing. It's fine. Don't need to understand all the flags, but read one of the guides online, how to compile the kernel. Great. You learned a lot of things from trying that, and just follow the tutorial. If you didn't understand something, fine. Who cares? Didn't work. You did it on a VM. Toss that VM away. Have a nice day. Goodbye. Like, don't be scared to play, to test, to try.
Another thing that I feel it's also useful, this is higher level than what you're saying now, is also build your own controller once. And when I say build your own controller, I don't mean like crossplane, right? I mean literally build a controller in whichever language you want. Hello world. Just to understand how actually you're listening to events, you're reacting to events, there is a loop, and so on and so forth. You can do it in a couple of hours. And all of a sudden something clicked, at least in my head, when I built a silly one, kind of, now I understand, right? There is a the last question. I'm skipping some, but hey, he just donated $20. I was about to say, we're finished. Thank you so much. It really helps. For mostly on-prem Kubernetes, would you run a stretched cluster across 2 data centers plus VMs on AWS, or 2 individual Kubernetes cluster with workload failover, traditional prod and data recovery, disaster recovery? Oh, I mean,
okay.
VMs on AWS, that might easily kill you for latency reasons.
Yeah.
Depending on where you are.
Correct. My general approach on this is very simple. Follow the rules that AWS follow when it comes to availability zones, that Azure follow, that Google follow. It is all 3 within a specific distance from one another with a very specific latency that are all under the control of one person. If they are not under your control, they are not an availability zone for you because you are dependent on someone else. You want to just be dependent on the areas. You don't want to be with this in AWS, this and there. Do not spread Kubernetes clusters across multiple different infrastructure providers. It becomes absolute living hell because how do you deal with the CPI? How do you deal with the CSI? What CSI are you going to use when you're running in AWS and on-prem? Can't use EBS CSI, can't use EFS CSI. You can't use it becomes an absolute mess. The answer of the question of stretched clusters on premise, especially like in the vSphere world where we have stretched clusters, where you have one vSphere cluster that stretches across 2 data centers, and then you stretch the storage across them, things like that. I am completely against that at every single level possible on planet Earth.
I was afraid for a second that you would continue towards do it.
I am a huge fan of stretch clusters for traditional workloads, not for Kubernetes. Kubernetes is cloud native applications. Cloud native applications, the idea and what the industry has decided, and for good or for bad, I'm not saying necessarily if it's good or bad, but what the industry has decided is that disaster recovery and all that is at the application level and not at the infra level. Therefore, because that is the assumption of Kubernetes, can you do like weird things to Kubernetes to make it work on stretch clusters? Yes. Will it work? Yes. Is it recommended? No, because most of the assumptions that tools make when they are built for Kubernetes and all that is not using things like stretch clusters. You follow the Kubernetes practices, follow the cloud practices, follow the cloud native practices. Therefore, it is better to have 2 different clusters. With things like GitOps, it is easy to make sure you deploy to both. With tools like Avi from VMware, or things like F5, or things like K8GB, which is open source. You have global service load balancing in Kubernetes across 2 clusters, and you can solve your challenges. If you need communication between the 2 clusters because you want active-active, go look at Cilium and Cluster Mesh, or Antria and their multi-cluster service APIs, right? All of these things exist. We have the tools that are built by the Kubernetes ecosystem for the Kubernetes ecosystem that work really well for global service load balancing, as well as building a mesh of clusters. Do not stretch a cluster.
That's about it. We are way over the time. See you all next Thursday, with or without Scott. We'll find out.
Without
Cheers,
Scott.
Everyone. Without
Cheers.
Scott. Okay, so cheers.
Cheers.